Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Super-Fanta-Fi. This being a show where it's about TV shows of the supernatural, fantasy, and or science fictional genre. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the latest episode of Legacies. A lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. First and foremost, we are picking up with Hope's situation of her humanity is slowly creaking in more, well, creeping, I don't know why I said, well, it's creaking through, but it's peeking through the creaks and cracks in the armor that she's built up of no humanity, and now she's getting more and more of it back to the point she's seeing herself everywhere, and her mind isn't necessarily like we already know. Without her humanity, she's not at her best because she doesn't think things through. She does whatever she thinks it's best for in her own best interest, because not caring about people to her is her greatest strength, because caring about people was her greatest weakness. It's because she even throws it at her humanity later on. It's like, oh, we're talking about the same person that got fooled by two fake Landons and then ultimately couldn't kill him when the time came. But her, yes, the heart can, with all that humanity, you can be fooled. But I love the lesson that came about. I'm jumping ahead, but I do like that by restoring her humanity, it gave the others like stat boosts essentially. Because I love that this basically turned into, I'm not the most well-versed in all things D&D, but I've played enough video games with stats and stuff like that to know that, like, hey, she, by being Hope, the Hope that they come to know, the Hope that they love, the Hope that they fought beside time and time again, that Hope gives them strength. That Hope's leadership gives them courage. It gives them permanent stat boost in a fight. So I thought that was kind of an interesting element, that by her being who she is right now, she's just throwing people to like to be sent to be slaughtered. It's the people that are her friends, and obviously they're fed up with her. Like, right, we're not just going to be sent just for you to kill us, get us killed over and over again, because even her way of doing that isn't enough. And even when she tries to go up against Ben's dad later on, even after sending everyone to the slaughter, it's still not enough with her. But when she takes the brunt of it, when she is willing to sacrifice herself first, it gives everyone else the strength to be there by her side when the time matters, and they ultimately end up winning. Like I said, I'm jumping ahead a little bit, but I thought that was such a neat thing. It is a power of friendship. Once again, time and time again, I've said it. I am a sap for that. I love the whole, like, right, when you have your friends by your side, when they, it's just like, right, the power, without spoiling it, kind of, Kingdom Hearts stuff is always what is the personification of that. Once again, I guess truth be told is any shonen anime type thing will have that element, like, my Nakama or what give me strength. They're the reason why I fight as hard as I do. They fight by my side, and I will always fight to protect them, type of thing, right? So, but like I said, I jumped the gun with a lot of this jumping straight ahead, but I do like the element of, right, it's Wade and Vardamus running simulations. Essentially, it's a giant D&D campaign of like, and I love Wade's already put everyone's stats up. I love the whole Caleb has a boost to certain stats, but MG's still faster than him. It's like, wait, there's no way he's faster than him. He's like, to an extent, yes. And they do a little bit of a race, and MG gets to the ribbon or whatever first, and he's just like, yeah. Because I think that also hits Caleb's pride, because he was he always big brothers. I guess that, well, they're not big brothers, but he always felt like he it's like, oh yeah, like MG, he's my son. Like the metaphorical sense, which is such an interesting thing. Like, the personification of like you sonning someone, not in like the general, like, I feel like it gets used a lot in the hip hop world, but like, oh yeah, you sonning someone of like, yo, this is my, like, because Caleb's always been kind of the older brother, like, cool, I'm the tougher one, I'm the stronger one, but it's like, wait, you're faster than me, kind of irks his nerves a little bit. Even if it's just that 2-point difference, because I think Caleb was like 92 and MG was 94. It's just that 2-point difference it makes all the difference in a battle, I guess, But I love the D&D, like I say, campaign of it all. Obviously, Ethan's trying to use his powers, but he's like, oh, I can teleport and I can turn invisible. I'm just not quite sure how to always use which ability when. And it's like, all right, so try and teleport across the room. He's like, I am trying. And it's just like, oh, poor Ethan. And it's like, yeah, thank you. So that's kind of an unreliable element. Obviously, Cleo doesn't have her powers, but even if she is just a regular human, she still wants to fight beside her friends. And I love that Vardamus is like, and that's courage plus 10. That means a lot. You know, still willing to stand up and fight despite her circumstances. So, Ben operating as his father, well, because it's like, right, no one knows my father better than I do, and he also can't actually fight against his family. It's another aspect of the curse that we've never really talked about before. I guess he never really thought having to fight them would ever be a thing that he have to be worried about, because I don't think it seems like he doesn't know about the circumstances of his family. He just knows that they were gone, because, you know, Vulcan is his half sister, so all we got in that flashback was she said a father's gone, and you know that's it. She never really went into the specifics. I don't know if they, well, we know that, well, Ben has to know now because Hope's there and knows about the coffins and stuff, so that probably, and Vardamus was there too, so that probably adds some clarity of like, right, they're locked up. Granted, he doesn't know that there's a key situation going on inside of himself, so. But we'll get to that a little bit later on. But I do like how the board is set up. To be fair, that board is set up with the notion that Ben's dad is the only one up. Because I'm assuming the rest of the family would fall in line if if the other's away. Which, I'm surprised this didn't spark anything in, excuse me, it didn't spark anything in Hope, because going up against him, especially, because there's a heavy comparison that can be made to Klaus, because I made the comparison too, like, oh, them sleeping in these coffins is very similar to what Klaus would do to his siblings, so there's that. And then also there's a little bit of like, right, another group of people they had to, that's been dealt with over the course of like, you know, Vampire Diaries and such, the heretics. You know, so there's always like a group, but obviously it feels like there's a more direct correlation to the originals, especially because they were like the closest things, because like there are very few things that can kill the originals, and that was like the white oak and everything. So they weren't obviously god status, but they were the closest thing at one point. They were top tier of the animal kingdom. So that was kind of their position for a good chunk of time, because there was nothing stronger than them, technically speaking, just because the originals would have the advantage of nothing else could kill them. So, which I should also point out, I found it fascinating that Jin and Ben's dad is played by Luke Mitchell. I was like, hey, that's cool. Assortment of things I know him from. CW wise, interestingly enough, obviously more recently, the Republic of Sarah, which once again I'm kind of bummed that got canceled. But I want to say the first thing I might have ever seen him in was also something CW related, was the second reboot of the Tomorrow People, because at the time I didn't know that, but that shows, because I think that show's originally based on a book, but there was an adaptation of that show. There was an adaptation of the book, TV show wise, made back in the 70s that ran for like 3 seasons. Then like a reboot came out in like the 90s that was short-lived, and then like the 2013 one. Tangents and all that aside, it's like that, Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., and immediately after Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. he was doing Blind Spot, and then after Blind Spot, Republic is there. But I was like, hey, when I saw his name, I was like, oh, Luke Mitchell, that's cool. So that was really interesting. So knowing he's playing their dad and jumping around a little bit, I do like we got an explanation from Jen about why she locked her family away. Once again, very reminiscent of like, man, family drama. I mean, that's the heart of what this is, this show. I mean, this universe is built around that. The Vampire Diaries, the originals, and even this. At the core of it, it always comes back to family. That's always been a major and massive theme across all 3 shows. So, I mean, because even this is like, right, they're the legacies. They're the next generations. This is the next generations of these respective families in these, you know, that we've kind of followed to some extent. Like, you know, Alaric's family situation with Josie and Lizzie. But tangents and all that aside, getting a better understanding that Jen was always the outcast of her family. She never liked war. She was never big into the notion of, oh, I'm gonna build weapons to kill people. In fact, she was more so meant to she decided to make armor for her family. Like, right, I'll protect you. I won't make weapons so that you can kill people. And because she's not one of those warmongering gods, which, once again, a lot of things will often depict, man, gods suck. They're the worst. They're terrible. Especially her dad, because she's like, yeah, my dad just like fire, tornadoes, doing whatever he can to punish humans for every little thing. But her dad came to her one day, and she was like, I saw him in a way I've never saw him before, afraid. And it's like, right, what could challenge a god? Malivore. A being that exists that can make people forget about you. Because this really was interesting, because I like this notion, because American Gods, if you've ever seen it or read the books, I'd assume the book really dives into this as well, but it was a main theme of the TV show. Is an important plot point is that gods, their power comes from being believed in, and as time passes, gods fade from more and more from people's memories. And what do? You become stories. I think even the stories still help to some extent, but without true belief in them, the gods have weakened heavily. So they weren't and when you go up against an enemy that can literally make the entire world forget you, yeah, that's essential death for a god. So it makes you wonder, when Malivore eats you, would it immediately make a god die? Because no one remembers you anymore, so of course you're going to die. So that's fascinating in its own regard. But I like that, like, and it makes sense. A god feeds off of belief. I don't remember if that ever came up in the Almighty Johnsons. It might have. I don't know. I definitely know it was a key element. It's part of Wednesday's plan. He needed people to believe in him, specifically Shadow. That was a major plot point, but regardless. So I thought that was such an interesting element. And so she promised to make basically a coffin that they would protect her family from ever being tracked down by Malivore. The moment Malivore was gone, they were supposed to be free, but it turns out she has the only key. She claimed to have destroyed it, but Lizzie saw through it, because it's like, no, you didn't. Because despite everything, you could have easily chucked these, like, you want to get rid of, like, you don't want your family ever released. You could have easily chucked them in a volcano. She's like, I just want to keep tabs on where they could have been. I don't want to take the chance I'd lose sight of them. It's like, no, because you care about them. Despite Klaus locking his family and punishing them by putting them in coffins with those white oak daggers in their chest and stuff, he still kept them because they were family. Despite everything, family is family and will always have a grip on you. What is Lizzie doing? Lizzie's doing what she's doing for family. What is Aurora doing this for? Family. So I thought that was fascinating. But to prevent her from ever being tempted to get the key back and saving her family, she put it inside of Ben, and then she fed Ben to Malivore, which is heartbreaking. Because she's like, right, as long as you're inside of Malivore, the monsters won't keep coming after you. So this is kind of for the betterment of everyone, because Ben didn't know that she stuffed the key inside of him. It's still going to be hell in there, because I think it's also because Jen didn't know how Malivore works. I mean, that Malivore situation also, it's complicated, because sometimes the worlds would bleed over. Like, everyone's in their invisible jail cells, but sometimes inside of Malivore it become a free-for-all where, like, some of those jail cells, like, overlapped. So who knows whether Ben really had to deal with any of that inside of Malivore. He was still inside of Malivore for a very, very, very long time, which is actually sad. And Jen has her regrets about it. She wishes that she could, she's like, yeah, but when Malivore died, everything inside of him died, so Ben's probably dead somewhere because of that. And she's like, yeah, I wish I had an opportunity to make it up to my half-brother, to tell him I'm sorry for what I put him through, to make him understand, like, right, I just didn't have any other choice. This is the only way to make sure our father didn't run rampant and couldn't take the chance he'd ever get awakened again. Which Lizzie and Aurora both know Ben's alive, but they didn't tell Jen. So that ends up turning into an interesting thing where they were going to the school to get the key, and Lizzie sees Alaric is alive. It's like, wait, my dad's alive. But it's like, what do I do? One of the main reasons why I wanted to rewind time is to save my dad. But now it's like, wait, he's here. But there's still like the Hope thing. And then there's the Josie thing. But it's like, right, I want to at least talk to my dad. Which Aurora's like, I'm not going to punish you for wanting to see your dad. If I had the opportunity, I jump at it too. So it's not going to disrupt our blood pact because I won't see that as betrayal. But she's like, right. But if you were trying, like, if you try to wake up one of the gods and it doesn't work, you're going to try and wake up the others. And I'd have to tell my dad. And she's like, and yes. And then I would see that as a betrayal because you would be working with your family to stop me, which Lizzie working with them is part of the plan. They don't know about that little contingency about the blood pact. There's probably a way around that, but still. Because a key part to all of this is that, because initially Hope's like tactic was to take Lizzie off the board, but anytime they didn't get Lizzie on their side, they would lose because they needed her with her siphoning powers and such. She is a key figure in all of this. Because I was more, and I do like that you're like, oh, sentimentally, it's like, right, you need her on your side because you need everyone on your side with this. But it's also because she does also tactically serve a purpose. But it's also like, because that was the complications early on is, right, Lizzie was going to be the X factor. There was no guarantee what side she would ultimately choose, but given the opportunity, she would come back to their side. She would be an enemy for a bit, but still. And it had to be a little creepy, like going up against like those model versions of them that Vardamus built. But ultimately, like I said, they don't know about that contingency, so that makes it harder to get Lizzie on your side. And they need Lizzie on their side to make this all happen. Like, she is a linchpin part of this plan. Well, another major part is getting Hope's humanity back. So that's interesting element to it. But so Lizzie has to work with Rebecca, like, right, we are trying to be better versions of ourselves. So let's awake. The plan was to awaken Kronos because even Jim was like, yeah, he was the nicer of the ones. He's like, he never forgot my birthday. It's like, yeah, but that's also the thing. He might be the nicer of the bunch. He could still be a complete and utter tool bag. I mean, what they're obviously making the original comparison, making a comparison to the Michelsons. They're hoping for an Elijah. Hopefully they get an Elijah, but obviously you could always end up getting a Finn, a Cole, or a Rebecca, which they all came with their own complications as well. I mean, Elijah did too, because Elijah had his darker side, obviously. Like, that was something he struggled with. And who's to say when you awaken Kronos, he won't be that. So we'll see. Like, oh, you think you... I mean, who's to say his loyalty won't be to... Oh, like, I'm going to awaken... Jen and Ben's dad, so we'll see. But ultimately, at the end of it all, they end up kidnapping Ben, which sucks. Well, because all they really need though is the key. So I'm assuming they were just gonna rip into him. It's like, right, he'll heal, so we'll get the key and be on our way. We'll see whether that ends up being the case or not, but. The sad thing is, too, like, Ben was talking to Jed, and it was like, right, he's a pessimistic person. Understandable, considering your history, considering, like, your whole thing is, like, cool, I get eaten and ripped apart by monsters on a daily basis for a very, very long time. That was my punishment. Of course you're going to have a pessimistic view on the world, like, oh, nothing's going to work out. But he's like, right, I am starting to be a little bit more optimistic. He's like, it feels good, like, almost believing that things can work out. That ends up being a conversation in this episode too, that Alaric is waiting for the other shoe to drop, but MG's like, maybe the other shoe won't drop. It obviously inevitably always does, sadly. And that kind of parallels that too, that Ben and Alaric are kind of the pessimists, but I'm sure they'd call it, no, that's just us being the realist about it. So now Aurora and Lizzie have the key needed to awaken the gods. We'll see if that's... Because it's super going to backfire in their face. Whatever the circumstance is going to be, it's because there's only like, what, 2 episodes left this season? Like, it's going to end with all the gods awaken, and then all of season 5 is going to be with dealing with the gods. Like, it's just going to work out that way. It's not going to be all resolved by the end of the season. It's like, no, it's going to be a major, like... them all being awoken. At the very least, Ben and Jen's dad's going to be awakened. Whether the rest of the family will, I'm assuming they would be, and that's the whole aftermath of what you have to do, like dealing with like a whole bunch of gods walking the earth and the complications coming from that. Because hey, barely being able to take down one god who's most likely the strongest of them all. Granted, they're all in a weakened state too because no one believes in them, but if you put yourself in a position where people start believing in them more and more, they'll probably gain their strengths back. Because at the end of the day, even without people believing them, they're still gods. Getting people believing them, that's just going to like add permabust. That's just going to boost their stats the entire time. So we'll see. I did like the conversation between Alaric and Vardamus, where he was like, right, he can't help but, you know, be worried about his kids, that it's like, right, this was never he kind of wishes they had never gotten into this fight. And I love Vardamus saying, like, it is the thing of the current generation always hopes that things are better for the next generation. And he was saying that the kids at this school are exceptional, that they will be the ones who have the capability to make a change, that everything will work out for the better, having trust in them and their abilities to have things done. Obviously Hope going through what she went through this episode, her kind of finally breaking down, once again, finally listening to her humanity, but it became too much. She's like, no, and she's telling herself to shut up, and she's starting making her powers go haywire. She's like, why are you guys just standing here? I told you I don't care about you. Who's going to stop me? And Alaric, like, snapped her neck. Because she's going haywire, her humanity it coming back, bubbling to the surface, like she's starting to act like that despite her humanity being off, because it's on the borderlines of being switched back, and it's too much, because she's a little bit of afraid of caring about them again, and I'm sure like all those feelings coming rushing back are going to be a lot too. So I thought it was interesting that Alaric is talking to someone at the end. He's like, yeah, you and MG were right, and I'm like, who could he be referencing? At first, I was wondering if he was talking about Josie, whatever it is Josie's off doing. The actress who plays her, Kaylee Bryant, probably won't be back. Like, she left the show. There's always a possibility of just because she left the show doesn't mean she won't make a final appearance by the end of the season and then leave again. Just like Carlos, the actor who plays Cisco on The Flash. Him and Tom Cavanaugh, who played Reverse Flash, made appearances in the season 7 finale, even though they kind of left the show earlier in the season. So that's my thing of wondering, maybe will we get something like that? Because it's like either he was talking to her, or he might, because I'm only thinking that now, because initially I was thinking because Kaylee Bryant did leave the show, I was like, it probably won't be her. So I was leaning more towards like either Freya or Rebecca. Like I figured it had to be someone had a even closer tie to Hope, but Josie does as well. So that's why I'm like, I don't know if this is going to be like a final appearance thing, at least for now, or what that's going to be. So I can see it being either one of those three, or maybe at least a combination of maybe all of them, or maybe it's just Rebecca and Freya. We'll ultimately have to wait and see how that plays out, what that turns into. But I also thought there was the interesting deal between MG and Ethan, where it's like, right, despite everything, because Ethan's like, all right, I need to get a better control of my abilities because people are going to die if I don't. But then MG was like, people might die even if you do. He's like, even with the best results they can get of beating Ben and Jen's dad, it still wasn't enough so that everyone survives. At least 2 people will die. And he's like, no matter what it is, we need to make sure that one of those people isn't Lizzie. And he's like, right, no matter what. And they both agree on that. So showing that either Ethan or MG could die in the end of this, and if not, and if they're going to make sure it's not Lizzie, they'll either sacrifice themselves, which could be looking at predecessors and stuff, this could be a very come down to the wire, like the whole Stefan and Damon thing. There could definitely be a parallel they're trying to make there. I mean, obviously that parallel already exists with, even more so with MG and Caleb, but There's a part of you that's like, man, that would suck either way, because if Ethan died, it's like, man, his family. If MG died, obviously everyone would be heartbroken. But also on top of that is like, I think Lizzie would be heartbroken either way. But the fact is they've set that up, either one of them is going to die, and I think the other one's going to sacrifice himself, very much like Stefan sacrificing himself so that Damon could live. I think very reflective of that is what we can really expect of this. So I think one of them is going to sacrifice himself to make sure not only Lizzie survives, but that the other. And I'm leaning more towards probably Ethan, but you never know. It could definitely be an MG ultimate sacrifice situation, which would be heartbreaking considering it's like, right, him and Lizzie never had their chance, and maybe at the end, just when they're about to have their chance, it's like, right, I have to do this. I have to make sure you survive at the very least. We'll see. Like, I feel like that is a flip of the coin of, like, depending on what the creators decide to do, or, you know, maybe it's fueled by where the actors stand in certain regards about, you know, continuing the show and whatnot. We'll have to wait and see. So there's that. There's also the Cleo thing I thought was interesting, because Cleo now wants to look a little more into her circumstances. Because of everything. Because Vardamus did say that normally when a witch loses their connection, it's all or nothing. The fact that she can still use magic despite it causing her pain is kind of an abnormality. So for him, he's like, right, pain can also be seen as a sign of things changing. And I was like, is that supposed to mean that maybe he's trying to say that she's going through this pain because now her powers are shifting because of what Aurora did, and her powers are trying to compensate, and yet it's because she's trying to flex a certain muscle, like use her powers the way she's always used them, that maybe now it's manifesting in a different way because of her I don't know if that's what he's getting at, but I thought that was so fascinating. I'm like, what exactly does that mean? So it's going to be interesting to see how Cleo handles that as she dives into that deeper understanding and understanding what her abilities are now. Then also in the limbo situation, I love that it's like, right, we're working for the Djinn, and Ted, you know, the necromancer got in his head, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to get us fired by basically doing such a terrible job, he'll have no choice but to let us go. No, he just moved them to janitorial duty, and then they run into Elvis, who ends up, apparently he got mugged by people, someone is going around stealing people's coins. And I love that Ted did a Elvis impression. He was like, yeah, you're the first one who's done that. It's like, oh, poor Elvis. But Ted saw this as an opportunity that I forgot how exactly they were going to benefit from this. Because at the end of the day, you have Landon still wanting to do the right thing, like us stealing coins from people, and like, let's just do the job we have to do. But at the end of the day, dealing with these people is better than dealing with the Djinn. Well, as Ted puts it, we're not substituting one tyrant for another. We're going to investigate, find out who these people are who are stealing coins, and that's where we'll stop it at that. We're not going to work for them instead of the Djinn. It's like, no, we're not going to exchange one tyrant for another. So Landon wasn't reluctant at first, but he's like, right, the whole thing about working with people is like, you don't leave your partner high and dry. So despite whatever they're doing, even if you don't agree, you kind of have to go with them because you can't let them go at it alone. And I love what happens. They get tranquilized and put in a vehicle. And I'm like, that's so weird to know that that's happening in limbo. That's so weird knowing that's happening. But it's like, all right, who could it be? Could it be people connected to Triad, or who could it be? I'm like, it's got to be it's going to end up being some people we're familiar with. Maybe not. Maybe it's going to be a familiar face who found a new group of people or something. Or maybe it's just going to be a whole bunch of familiar faces. I'm curious to see what that reveal ends up being. I'm excited to see where all of this ends up taking us going forward into the next episode. But really, that's all I want to talk about. Till the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and goodbye.